If you've tried everything but still feel stuck in your symptoms, this episode will help you understand how unresolved stress patterns may be quietly keeping your body inflamed and unwell, and what you can begin shifting to change that today. You've been told it's incurable, but here at Renegade Remission, we believe in rewriting the story. If you're facing a terminal or chronic illness, you are not alone. I'm Eleni Welch, certified nutritionist, and each week I share healing strategies and remission stories to help you take control of your health, feel better, and rediscover hope. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. In this episode, you'll discover exactly how trauma reshapes inflammation, hormones, and immune function inside the body, learn why your nervous system, not just your diagnosis, influences whether healing pathways stay open or blocked, and hear a real survivor story showing how resolving long-held survival patterns changed the trajectory of a chronic illness. Stay with me until the end because I'll give you trauma-informed steps you can start today that support healing without forcing you to relive painful memories or overwhelm your system. When people hear the word trauma, many assume it refers only to extreme events, trauma with a capital T. But trauma is not defined by what happened, it is defined by how the nervous system perceived and adapted to survive what happened. For some people, trauma is obvious. Accidents, loss of a loved one, violence, abuse, or medical crises. For others, it is less obvious, quieter, and more cumulative. Years of chronic stress, emotional neglect, unhealthy relationships, constant uncertainty, or living in a body that never felt fully safe. What matters biologically is not the story itself, but the physiological imprint it left behind. Trauma changes breathing patterns, muscle tension, hormone rhythms, immune signaling, digestion, sleep cycles, and inflammatory responses. It can shape how your nervous system interprets the world and whether your body remains in survival mode long after the danger has passed. This is not a psychological weakness. It is neurology doing exactly what it evolved to do, protect you. And before we explore the science, I want to begin with a real human story, not a clinical trial, but a documented survival testimonial shared publicly in mind-body healing communities. When you hear it alongside the research, something important will begin to emerge. This is a clinical narrative described by Gabor Maté in his work with patients living with autoimmune disease. This is not a randomized study and it's not presented as proof of causation, but it's a physician's observation of patterns that appeared repeatedly in his clinical practice, later supported by trauma and stress research. Maté describes working with a woman in her 40s diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis whose disease had progressed steadily despite appropriate medical treatment. She experienced chronic joint inflammation, fatigue, and periods of debilitating flare-ups that seemed to appear without clear physical triggers. What stood out to him was not only her symptoms, but her temperament. She was described as exceptionally conscientious, deeply responsible, and habitually self-sacrificing. She rarely expressed anger. She prioritized others' needs before her own and had difficulty setting boundaries, even in situations that left her exhausted. When asked about her childhood, she described growing up in an environment where emotional needs were minimized and where staying quiet, agreeable, and easy was the safest way to maintain connection. Over time, Gabor Maté observed a pattern he had seen in many patients with autoimmune conditions: chronic emotional suppression paired with physiological hypervigilance. Her body had learned to override its own signals in order to preserve attachment and safety. When this patient began trauma-informed therapy, focused not on revisiting memories but on reconnecting with bodily awareness and authentic emotional expression, subtle changes began to emerge. She started practicing boundary setting in small ways. She learned to notice tension in her body and release it rather than override it, and she allowed herself to acknowledge anger instead of internalizing and suppressing it. According to Maté's account, as the woman's emotional patterns shifted, the intensity and frequency of her flare-ups decreased. She reported improved energy, fewer severe inflammatory episodes, and a greater sense of internal stability. Her rheumatologic care continued, but the trajectory of her illness changed significantly once her nervous system no longer lived in constant self-suppression. Maté does not argue that trauma causes autoimmune disease in a simplistic way. Instead, he suggests that chronic stress, emotional repression, and long-term survival adaptation create physiological conditions, including immune dysregulation and inflammation, that increases vulnerability over time. When you hear this narrative alongside the science of stress physiology, something becomes clear. Trauma is not stored as a memory alone. It is embedded in our muscle tone, immune signaling, hormonal rhythms, and autonomic balance. And when those patterns begin to shift, healing can follow. Modern trauma research shows that long-term stress reshapes disease risk through several interconnected biological pathways. These pathways do not operate separately. They form a dynamic system linking brain, immune function, and hormones alongside gene expression. Research by Bessel van der Kolk and others demonstrate that trauma shifts the autonomic nervous system towards chronic sympathetic activation and shutdown states. In survival mode, digestion slows, inflammation rises, and cellular repair processes become secondary to immediate protection. Over time, this creates an internal environment that favors disease progression rather than healing and recovery. Rachel Yehuda's work on trauma and cortisol regulation shows that chronic trauma disrupts the body's stress hormone rhythms. Some individuals experience persistently elevated cortisol, others develop blunted stress responses. Both patterns contribute to inflammation, sleep disruption, immune imbalance, and reduced tissue repair capacity. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology reveal that unresolved trauma increases inflammatory cytokines such as interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha. These inflammatory signals are not disease-specific. They appear across autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and chronic pain syndromes. Research by Meany and Sizef et al. Demonstrates that early life stress alters gene expression through methylation patterns, affecting stress response and immune regulation. Importantly, these epigenetic changes are not permanent. Supportive environments, therapy, meditation, and safety-building practices can shift gene expression back towards resilience and healing. The ACE study led by Filidi et al. Showed strong correlations between early adversity in childhood and later chronic disease risk. Crucially, the mechanism involved is a physiological adaptation meant to be helpful, but altering sleep, stress coping, inflammation, and metabolic patterns. If trauma has touched your life, whether it's dramatically or subtly, it does not mean that you caused your illness or a single event caused your illness, but it does mean that your body learned survival strategies that were once protective and now may be hindering your health. Healing does not require erasing your past. That's pretty much impossible. It involves helping your nervous system experience safety again so that repair pathways can come back online. Here are some practical action steps you can take today. Instead of diving directly into trauma memories on your own, begin with physiological safety. Start by creating one predictable moment each day that signals calm to your nervous system. This could be sitting with warm tea while breathing slowly, stepping outside for sunlight, or placing a hand over your heart and noticing your breath. Repetition matters more than intensity because your nervous system learns safety through consistency. Next, practice extending your exhale. Breathing in for 4 counts and out for 8 gently activates vagal pathways associated with parasympathetic regulation. Many people notice reduced muscle tension within minutes. If you feel ready, explore trauma-informed modalities. Approaches such as EMDR, somatic experiencing, trauma-sensitive yoga, or polyvagal-informed therapy allow the nervous system to renegotiate survival responses gradually. Equally important is cultivating safe connection. Research shows that even one reliable, supportive relationship reduces inflammatory signaling and improves stress resilience. Healing does not happen in isolation. I discussed the importance of connection and relationship in my episode 8, Why Loneliness is as Deadly as Smoking and 3 Ways to Reverse It, as well as episode 6, 3 Ways Community Heals Your Body and Protects Against Disease. So be sure to check out those episodes. Finally, be sure to honor pacing. Trauma healing is not linear. Small experiences of safety accumulate and reshape biology over time. Trauma does not have to define who you are. It reflects how your body learned to survive, and survival responses are not meant to be permanent states. As your nervous system learns safety, your biology will begin to change. Inflammation will decrease, repair pathways will reopen, and your body will move towards balance. Healing is not about forcing transformation, it's about creating conditions where transformation becomes possible, and your body already knows how to move in that direction. In upcoming episodes, I'll continue sharing nutrition, lifestyle, and mind-body based techniques for healing from terminal and chronic illness, so be sure to stay tuned for those episodes, and as always, go be renegades.